Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making the Peekaboo bag as inspired by a Fendi design. Let's get right into it. So the first step, the top panel and the stud panel. So we're going to take one stud panel and then on the wrong side now, we're going to draw a line down the center of the long edge, and then we're going to fold each long edge to meet the line at the center. So after folding it to the long edges to the center now, we're going to fold the short raw edges wrong sides together. So the raw edges are going to be folded wrong sides together, and then we'll use clip to hold it like this. Now we're going to sew all the raw edges with a 1/8 inch seam allowance, and then we'll repeat the same thing for the 3 remaining stud panels. Now we're going to take the top panel and then we'll center the top panel interfacing at the center of it. So we're going to center the top panel interfacing. Okay, so centering it means that there will be 1 inch space on the short edges and then 0.5 inch or ½ inch on the long edges. And then we're going to fold the short edges to meet the edge of the top interfacing. Then we'll sew that short edges, the short folded edge, with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. After which we're going to measure 0.75 inch, that's 3/4 inch, and from one short edge, and then 1 inch from one long edge, and then we're going to install the 2 male magnetic snap on both on both short edges now. So now we have so I installed the female first, and then we have the male also installed, the same thing we did for that one. So now we're going to measure 2.75 inch from one short edge and then 0.75 inch from the long edge on the wrong side of the top panel, right? And then we'll do the same thing for the 2 short edges like this, so that we can set the 2 stud panel wrong side down at that mark, the mark we made just now, and then we're going to sew it with 1/8 inch and then 1/4 inch just to secure everything in place. And then we'll repeat the same thing for the second top panel and the 2 remaining stud panels, so that we have this. Now take a stud rivet. A stud rivet is like this, and then we are going to install them ½ inch from one short edge and centered on the stud panel. That is the one that has the female magnetic snap, right? And to this same one we're working with, the one that has the female magnetic snap and the stud rivet now, we're going to install the male end of the back lock at 1.125 inch from the raw edge, from the raw edge that is closer to the stud panel and then centered. So it will look like this. And then to the second one that have the male magnetic snap, now we are going to punch a hole that can fit the head of the stud rivets, and then we have it in place. Now we're going to fold the two top panels wrong sides together, matching the long raw edges, and then we're going to hold it in place with I'm using glue here, but you can just hold it with your clips because we're still going to sew it. So now we're going to hold it like this. And then we'll sew it with a 1/8 inch seam allowance on that on the raw edge. So it's been sewn now. So now take the female end of the bag lock and install it in between where you sew the stud rivets, the stud panel, on the second top panel, right? The one that has the male magnetic snap. Okay, so then after creating all the necessary holes according to the type of bag lock that I have now, we're going to put the bag lock as it should be. But I'm not going to screw it in just yet, and the reason is because this bag lock is very big, so I'm going to set it aside for now. Now take one top panel and then match the raw edges right sides together with the top edge of one main panel. Now clip them in place. And then sew that raw edge with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So it's done, and then we repeat the same thing for the second main panel and the top panel. Now step 2, the base panel. On the wrong side of the base panel, the first thing we'll do is draw a 3/8 inch line on each long edge, and then we're going to set the base interfacing on the wrong side of the base panel, and we're going to use glue to hold it in place. You can fuse yours depending on the kind of interfacing you're using. Okay, so we're going to draw a 2.5 inch from the short edges. So first I'm drawing the center line first, and the center is actually 6 inches because the whole base is 12 inches long. So then we draw a 2.5 inch from the short edges and then 1.5 inch from the long edges. Now give a small cut on the points where the lines intersect. That will be 6 points. And then install the purse fit on those points. Now we're going to take one of the main panels and then we're going to align the bottom edge of that main panel with one long edge of the base panel and then hold it with clips. It's going to be right sides together. Then we take this to the sewing machine and sew on that line, the 3/8 inch line we drew at the start of this step. So after sewing that, we'll fold the panels open and then so that the seam is towards the base, and then we top stitch it with 1/8 inch seam allowance on the base. Then we repeat the same thing for the other main panel and the other long edge of the base panel. So we set this aside for now. And then we take the piping panel. Then we're going to measure a 1.5 inch from both short edges and then draw a center line down the long edge. Now we're going to align the piping cord on the center line, right? And in between the short edge line, so it's not going to go beyond those 1.5 inch line on the short edges. Now we're going to fold this, matching the long edges to enclose the piping cord. So now we need 2 piping cord, and then we'll repeat the same thing for the second piping cord and the second piping panel. So this is it. Now we're going to take that main panel again, and then we'll match the long raw edge of the piping panel with one long edge of the main panel. Now you want to make sure you know the center of the main panel and then even the center of the piping panel, so that you can start matching from the center, then outward like that. So the raw edges have to be matching. Then we start clipping those in place. So now we're going to fold 1 inch on the ends of the piping panel at angle 90 degrees and then sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance using a zipper foot just to get just to be able to navigate the piping panel. Now we'll repeat the same thing for the other raw edge of the main panel. Now moving on to the side panel. So we install a press button, right? Both male and female press button on one of the side panels following the measurements given in the pattern. So the measurements are 1.25 inch from the short edges and then 2.5 inch from the long edge, so that it can hold together like so. So we'll repeat the same thing for the other side panel. So this is what your side panel should look like, popping out like that at the center. So this is how I achieve it. I fold it like that, then close it so that by the time I open it, it's like this. This is what we want the side panel to look like, so that it will give the bag the shape that it actually needs to. So I forgot to mention that first we're going to draw a 3/8 inch line on the top edge of the side interfacing. Then we're going to set the side interfacing on the wrong side of the side panel and then fuse it in place. Now we take one side panel, find the center of the of the bottom edge, find the center of the bottom edge, and then we match them right sides together, starting from that center. Start clipping in place. You want to match the center of the main panel to the center of the side panel. So after matching the bottom, we then go ahead and match the top edges of both the main panel and the side panel, again right sides together. Then we can now match the centers in between. So repeat the same thing for the other top edges, like so. So we match the top edge, and then we start matching the centers in between. So this will make sure that everything is accurate and smooth. Then we'll take this to the sewing machine, and then we're going to sew the entire edge with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and as close to the piping panel as possible. So we'll repeat the same thing for the other side of the main panel and the other side panel. And then we'll turn the bag to the right side. So I want to make sure that everything is nice and smooth. Just do it slowly, gently, and it will be out in no time. So yeah, now we're going to fuse you can either glue or fuse it. It depends on the kind of interfacing you're using. We'll fuse the main interfacing to the wrong side of the main panel, and then the base interfacing as well, on the base interfacing 1. So we are fusing the base interfacing 2 to base interfacing 1, because apparently the base interfacing 2 is thick. So we're going to fold the top edges of the bag. Now we're going to fold it to meet those lines that we drew at the beginning. No, there was a line we drew on the top edges of those interfacing, both the main panel interfacing and the side panel interfacing. So we're going to fold the top edge of the bag to meet those lines so that it now has a folded edge. So this is the point you do your zipper pocket and your slip pocket, and the video to do that is linked in the description below. So now moving on, we are in step 7, the divider panel, and then we're going to draw a line 1 inch from one of the short edges, and then we're going to fold that to meet, we'll fold the short edge to meet that line using either a glue or you can use double-sided tape. Now we're going to measure 6 inches from the other short raw edge. Now the only short raw edge we have really. We'll measure 6 inches from that. Then we'll set the divider interfacing on that 6-inch line. And then we're going to fold the raw short edge now to cover the edge of the interfacing, like so. And now we'll use the other part of the divider panel to cover up the interfacing. Again, I'm using glue, but you can use double-sided tape. So now this is the divider panel. I'm going to set that aside for now, and on the wrong side of the connector panel we'll draw a line down the center of the long edge, and then we'll fold both long edges to meet the line. Then I'm using glue to hold it in place. You can use double-sided tape. Top stitch the 2 long edges with a 1/8 inch seam allowance, and now you can insert a swivel hook onto your connector, and then you can also use D-ring here, then use swivel hook on your handle panel later on. So it depends on preference, right? Some of the testers prefer to use swivel hook here, some prefer to use a D-ring or an O-ring. So now we're going to measure 2 inches from one wrong edge of the divider panel. Now we're doing that where it has an opening. I mean the folded edges now. And then we're going to do that on both of the sides. Then we'll set the connector next to that 2-inch line. In between the divider panel, like this. So you then hold it with clips. Hold it in place with clips. And then you sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance on that edge. So now we've completed that, and then we're going to move to step 8, where we complete the divider panel and then the lining panel. Now we're going to lay the 2 lining panel wrong side up, and then we're going to draw a 3/4 inch line from the top edges. So we're doing this for the 2 lining panels. And next we're going to flip the lining panel to the right side and then set one divider panel ½ inch from the bottom edge of the lining panel. So I made a ½ inch from the bottom edge, and then we're going to set the divider panel on the side edge, but make sure it's not crossing that ½ inch on the bottom edge. Now sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then repeat the same thing for the other side of the lining panel. Now we're going to take the second lining panel and then hold the sides with clips. We are holding it right sides together with clips. Now we take this to the sewing machine, and then we're going to be sewing those edges with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to hold the bottom edges right sides together, and then we also sew it with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So now we're going to match the bottom corners. So pop the bottom corners open and then match them right sides together. Hold them with clips. And sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance as well. Now we repeat the same thing we did to one bottom corner to the other bottom corner. So it's done now. This is it. Transform the lining. So we're going to fold the top edge of the lining panel to meet that line that we drew from the beginning of this step, and then we'll hold it with clips or with double-sided tape. Now I actually changed this to over-ring. Remember when I was saying that we can either use swivel hook or over-ring, right? So I'm going to use the swivel hook on the handle panel since I'm using O-ring on the divider panel now, because I actually prefer that to, you know, using swivel hook on the divider panel. So now we're going to hold the top edge of the lining to the top edge of the bag. So make sure that the divider panel is at the center of the side panel. It has to be at the center of the side panel. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and then we'll top stitch around the entire top edge. So now it's done. It's done now. And remember, I did not install the female end of my bag lock because it was really big, but I actually did make the all the holes that I should make because it was easier at that point when the whole panel was still flat. Now I'm going to install it in place because I've done that final top stitching that I wanted to do. So it's not going to disturb anything if I install it at this point. And then you can close your press button, you know, make sure that your side panel is popping out as mine is in this video. It has to be popping out to actually show the shape of the bag, right? And then put your stud rivet in place, close your magnetic snap, close the bag lock, and then admire your bag at this point. And then we're going to move to the handles and the strap. So it's not done yet, but we are, you know, like 90% finished because the bag itself is done, just the handles. So now the handle panel, we're going to draw a 3/8 inch line on the two short edges of the handle panel and a line down the center of the long edge. So I'm going to apply some glue here. Like I always said, you don't have to use glue, you can use your double-sided tape. So now I'm going to draw a line 1.75 inch from one short edge, and then I will set my handle interfacing next to that line, and it has to follow the center line as I'm doing right now. Then we'll fold the two long edges to meet that center line. Then use double-sided tape or glue to hold everything in place. So now we're going to insert that swivel hook in place. Again, if you have used swivel hook on your divider panel, at this point you're not using swivel hook anymore. You use your D-ring or your O-ring. But because I used an O-ring on my divider panel, I definitely have to use a swivel hook on my handle panel. So yeah, we're going to hold that right sides together. I mean the short edges now, right sides together. and then we clip in place, then sew it with on the line. That's 3/8 inch seam allowance. So now we're going to give that seam allowance a slanted trim, as I'm doing right now. Then we'll fold the seam open. Of course, you're going to have to use glue or double-sided tape to hold the seams down, like so, to hold it open like that. And then we'll fold the long edges of the handle panel to the center so that it forms a perfect cycle. It might not be perfect, but it forms a cycle certainly. Then we're going to move the swivel hook, or if it is O-ring you used in your case, you're going to move it to you're going to move it about 0.7 inch to one short edge, and then hold everything wrong sides together. So for this, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew the entire edge with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now we are sewing the long edges with 1/8 inch seam allowance and as close to your swivel hook or O-ring as your machine can allow. So you can roll it like that so that it forms, like an arc, and then put it straight onto your O-ring on the divider panel. And of course, you can close back your bag and then set it aside for now, because now we have to do the very last step, which is the long strap. So the long strap now, the same thing we did for the handle panel, we're going to draw a 3/8 inch line on both short edges and then draw a center line. Now we're going to fold this. We're going to fold the long edges to meet that center line. I need you to understand that the long strap is into 4. So we have the long strap 1, and then we have the long strap 2. So for the long strap 1, it has a bigger panel, it has a longer panel and a shorter panel. The same thing for long strap 2. Now we're going to set aside those shorter ones, and then we'll leave the longer long strap 1. We'll leave the longer long strap 2. So now we're going to slide in one swivel hook on the longer piece of the long strap 1 now. So this could be a little confusing the way I'm saying it, but trust me, it is very, very clear and obvious in the pattern, because the pictures are there. It shows the ones that is longer and the one that is shorter. So now also we're going to slide in one swivel hook and one buckle or slider on the longer piece of long strap 2. Now I'm using slider because I don't have a buckle, but buckle would have been the ideal thing to use at this point. But trust me, I used a slider and it works perfectly for me. Now that might be because of the type of slider I am using. I don't know, but it works well. It wasn't removing. It was good. So you can use that. But the advisable thing to use is a buckle. Now we're going to hold the short edges of the long strap 2 right sides together, and then we'll clip it in place. Then we'll sew that with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. That's on the line. Then we'll take the long strap one, the 2 pieces of the long strap one, and hold it also. We're going to hold the short edges right sides together as well. So this is what we have. So the shorter one, the long strap 2, has both the buckle and the swivel hook, and the long strap one has only the swivel hook. So we have sewn the short edges on those lines, or with 3/8 inch seam allowance, and we're going to give it a slanted trim. Fold open the seam. You can hold it down with a double-sided tape or with glue, like I always say, and then we're going to fold the strap itself to meet the center. Now drag your swivel hook to one end. That should be 0.75 inch from the seam allowance, and then hold it wrong sides together, then clip in place. So we'll repeat the same thing for the long strap too. So now we want to drag the buckle up to 1 inch to 1 seam, and then we'll start holding it wrong sides together. Then we'll drag also the swivel hook up to about 3/4 inch to the other seam allowance, or to the other seam. Now the other seam, then we start holding it wrong sides together. So now we have both the long strap one and the long strap two. The long strap one is the longer one, the long strap two is the shorter one. Now we're going to take our belt loop and then fold it to the center like that, so give it a top stitching, a 1/8 inch top stitching on the long edges, and then we're going to attach it to the long strap 2 at 6 inches from the buckle or the slider. So we're going to tuck one raw edge up to half, up to half the size of the long strap 2, like so. Then we'll top the second raw edge to meet the first raw edge, like so. So it forms the belt loop, like the belt holder on a watch, something like that. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew, and of course we have to see how that works, because we'll start sewing from under that belt loop, right, to the other side of it. Like, just let's follow it. We start from under the belt loop. You just push the belt loop a little backwards, and then you start sewing. So we're sewing with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. and then we get as close on the short edge as to the swivel hook as our machine can allow it. Then we continue sewing 1/8 inch on the other long edge. Now we have to get under the belt loop when you get there, then you stop there. So we've only sewn like 1/2 of it. It's still remaining the other half. So like we did before, we're going to start from under the belt loop, you know, so that we can hold that belt in that belt holder in place. So we'll start from under it, and you know, we get to as close to the buckle or the slider as your machine can allow. Continue sewing 1/8 inch on the other long edge. So notice I am not back stitching this. I'm actually leaving a long tail thread so that I can, you know, pull everything to the back and tie it off, because I want everything to be nice and neat. So now we are done with the handle panel, the long strap panel, I mean to say. Then we're going to insert the long strap one onto the slider or buckle like this, using the belt holder to hold it in place, the belt holder or the belt loop, so that it forms one long adjustable strap. And then we are going to attach it to the hardware on the handle panel, and yeah, we are done. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. The link to get the pattern is in the description below. Get yours now. Bye bye.